Hello, so this is just a quick guide on how to put tank tracks onto vehicles for Unturned. And I'm going to be working off the assumption here that you already have a vehicle and you just want to put tank tracks on it. So if you don't, get modeling on that first and then come back. So I'm going to be working with one of the uncreated German vehicles, the Puma. And I'm going to be adding tank tracks to it because right now it doesn't have tank tracks because it hasn't been updated since the car update. So what we're going to do is first we're going to need to open the original blend file for the Puma, and I already have that open here. And I'm going to make sure of a few things. First of all, the vehicle needs to be facing -y. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate everything so that they're all facing -y, and I'm going to do this with a median point. Rotate by 180, and then I can apply. Well, I need to be careful about that actually. I'm just making sure that nothing's rotated intentionally. Okay, and as long as everything's good, I'm going to go ahead and select all, and I'm going to hit apply rotation. So now the first thing we have to do is we have to go in here and we have to get rid of the old tracks. So the easiest way to do this is just to select all the faces, and you hit Control L to select linked items. And you can just do, so I'm pressing space to do the search. You might have to change your setting or figure out your keybind for search. The easiest way to do that is to go to key map and change your spacebar action to search. It's very helpful. And then I'm just going to type separate selection, and I'm going to move these off to the side. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to move these vehicles to the center so it makes it easier to work with. So the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is to grab the grab like one of the coordinates. So we'll start with X, and then select everything that needs to move with it, and G, X, and then you're gonna paste like the negative value. So I only copied the 10, so I'm just gonna paste it, and now it's at 0. And we're gonna do the same with Y, so I'm gonna copy Y, I'm gonna say G, Y, and then I'm gonna type negative, and then I'm gonna paste, and then same with G or Z, I'm gonna do GZ -1, and now we are at the origin. And same for this, I'm just gonna manually move this to, we'll do like 10 or -10, 0, 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lay out how I want the wheels to look. I'm going to hide this for now. And I'm going to import, you should have a wheel mesh, or you could use the vanilla wheel mesh, but I'm going to go ahead and import those right now. And I'm going to go ahead and, we're not actually going to import this, so I'm going to get rid of the extras. And now we just have the high detailed ones. And I'm going to go ahead and give this a material so it's easier to look at. There we go. So first things first, I'm going to just kind of move these into place where I think they would look good. And I'll even use the old tracks as kind of a reference. And you also might want to scale these. I'm going to scale them down to 0.68. And I'm going to just put them in a place that seemed to make sense. This looks good to me. And then I'm going to duplicate it with Alt D, which will create like a clone or a linked clone. And then I'm going to just also move it to the other side. So then if we move this down, we can see that they roughly line up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the wheel and I'm going to do the same thing. All right, now that I got my wheels set up, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to align them on the y-axis, I guess. So I'm just going to take, I'll do 6.5 since it's even, and I'll just paste this on each and every one of them. And now that they're aligned horizontally, what we can do is we can go ahead and move this out of the way, and we can move these to where they're supposed to be. Line it up good. All right, now that we've done that, what we need to do is create a spline that will go around this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new Bézier curve. And it's going to spawn your 3D cursor, so go ahead and move it out. And then what I'm going to do is actually rotate this. I'm going to go into edit mode, and then I'm going to rotate this. So we'll do 90 on the Z, and then we'll do 90 on the Y. So it looks just like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move one of them right below this wheel. So I'll copy the X first. Sorry, make sure you are in global space here. So I'll copy the X, and I will copy the Y. And then for the Z, we can just manually move it. And we're gonna move it kind of slightly below the wheel. Maybe do so from the side view. Something like that will probably be good. And then for this one, I'm just gonna delete it. And then I'm gonna expand. I'm gonna press E to extrude over to the other wheel. And then we'll just make sure that the Y position is the same. And it looks like I'm gonna have to flip these vertices around, or the transform handles. Like so. And actually, same with this one as well. You can see the way it extends out. We're gonna have to flip it around. So that's easy enough. And then next, what we want to do is we want to create a curve around the wheel. This is easier if you hide the tank itself, so you can kind of see around it. And then I'm gonna just go ahead and extrude, and I'm gonna put it right in line with the wheel. And I'm gonna grab the Z position to make this a little more exact. And then I'll go ahead and rotate this so that it's facing the right direction. And I'm also going to select the middle, and I'm going to scale it down a bit. You want something that looks somewhat circular, but also kind of wraps around the wheel good. So actually what I want to do is I want to set this so that it's the same distance away from the center point. So what I'll do is I will set my cursor with Shift S, set my cursor to selected. Then I will redo this. I'll Shift D. Then I'll set my pivot point to the 3D cursor, and I'll just say scale Z -1. There we go. And then I will make these faces again, and I'll just select that middle vertice. Oops. I need to go back to medium point, and I'll select this middle vertice and scale to -1 again. So now you have a nice circle here. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And then there we go. We have our spline. So now what we need to do is we need to make a mesh to wrap around the spline. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a new cube. And then I'll go in here and I'll change the dimensions. I'm going to use 0.92 and 0.16 for the X and Z. But for the Y, this is actually important because this is your repeating distance. So I'm going to use 2/3 or 0.667. And that's because vanilla tanks use a repeating distance of 1.5. So 1/1.5 is 0.667. So this will give us like a unit of track. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control A to apply the scale. And I'm going to delete the two faces here because we don't need them. And then I'm going to create a tank track or tank track material. And you should have a tank track image. You can use the vanilla one or you can use a custom one. I'm going to use a custom one. And you're probably going to want to change the interpolation to closest. And now we're going to have to change the UV. So first of all, you're going to need to mark one of the sides as the seam. I suggest doing the bottom inside, even though you can't really tell the difference because we're going to make the UVs perfect. So then you're going to want to go to your UV editing. Again, make sure you're on Material Manager. And we're going to zoom in on our texture here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to press U, and I'm going to do the angle-based unwrapping, and it's going to look something like this. So what you can do to make this perfect is you can extend your little inspector here, take the X coordinate, and then divide 1 by the X coordinate, like so, and we'll get 3.3 or whatever. And I'm going to set my pivot point to 2D cursor. I'm going to make sure my 2D cursor is at the bottom left, and then I'm just going to scale on X by that value. And then that'll perfectly cover the texture, like so. You could also just manually edit these X points, but this is easier. So now we have a nice, perfect tank track coverage, and if I like move it to the left, you can see that it kind of tiles perfectly, which is what we want. Now that we've done that, I'm going to add an array modifier. I'll just search for array, And then I'm going to set the offset to -1 on the y-axis and 0 for the other ones. And I'm going to turn on merging. So what that's going to do, that's going to get us a nice set of tank tracks. And I'm going to up the count by quite a bit. I can put like 20. It's usually a good number. You'll have to adjust it however you see fit. And now that we've done that, we also need to add another modifier. That's the curve modifier. And we're going to select that curve we made. And we're going to select the deform axis as -y. And now you see that makes us a nice curve. It's very uniform. It looks good. And the UVs line up, which is important. And what we can do, I think there's one small problem with this. It's the origin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the cursor to world origin, and then I'm going to right click, set origin to 3D cursor. And that makes everything line up perfectly, assuming your cube is also at the world origin. So now we have our tracks. You might want to go in and make sure there's no overlapping or weirdness and make any adjustments you want. I'm going to actually bring this point out a little bit on my curve. So I can move it on the y-axis a fixed amount. That's too much. So I will go into this mode and I will move it just slightly. About like that. And then I'll do the same on this side. That's a little better. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a copy of these in case we need to change it in the future. So I'm just going to take this cube and this curve and I'm going to move it to the left a little bit to let it sit over there. So once these are moved over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this and I'm not going to move it. It's important that you leave it in the same spot. You make sure you're on your duplicate. And then you can right click, you got to go in order, but you can click this arrow, you can click apply on each one. And then you can move this out of the way and now you just have a normal mesh. Like so. And you can see if I try to mess with the UVs here, that it kind of tiles perfectly, which is nice. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this back to 0, 0. And I'm going to make some adjustments here. So for tank tracks to look good, you have to have a vertice right below every single wheel. If you double tap G in Blender, it lets you move without affecting the UVs. So what I'm going to do for this one, because this is angling up a little bit, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to double tap G, then I'm going to hold Alt to move in the opposite direction. So I'll do that in 3D actually. Double tap G, and then you have to move your mouse the opposite way, then you hold Alt, and you can move it the other way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up the best I can, and I'm going to hide this because it's in the way. So I'm going to line this up the best I can, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Okay, and then same with the next one. If you hold Alt and click, you can select the whole ring. And then double tap G, and we'll move it as close to under the wheel as possible. You can do the math if you want, but it's kind of a waste of time. And then with this ring, we have more rings than we do wheels. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double tap G, and I'm going to move it all the way over. I'm going to select all, and I'm going to search for merge by distance. And you'll see it removes those 4 vertices, and it leaves the UVs nice and intact. So then we can continue. Now that we're done with that, there's a little cleanup that needs to be done. This is kind of a matter of preference, but you don't necessarily need this high of a detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over a bit and kind of adjust how it looks. This is more of a matter of personal preference. So I'm going to merge these two, and I'm going to do merge by distance again. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And then another thing you need to do is come up here and remove all of these extras. You needed them to make the curve look right, but you don't need them anymore. You can do that in wireframe mode. Like so, and then just delete faces. And you can also, you might want to unhide your vehicle to make sure that that's not visible. Uh-oh, and it looks like you can see the wheel through. So what we're gonna do is move this wheel over. So you can't see it anymore. Don't want to move it too far over, but just enough so that you can't see it through the track. And the side looks good already. You'll notice our tank tracks are done, but they don't really line up correctly. So what I might want to do here is to scale it back a little bit on the x-axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my cursor at the center, Shift S, cursor to selected, and I'm going to select all, and I'm going to hit scale X, and we'll do just a little scaling until it doesn't clip into the vehicle anymore. And that should look a little better. Looks good on both sides, that's good. Now we need to duplicate it to the other side, so I'm going to move my cursor to the world origin, and I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to duplicate all these, and I'm going to right click so they stay in the same place. Shift E to duplicate, by the way. And then I'm going to scale this on, I'm going to make sure my transform pivot point is set to the 3D cursor, and then I'm going to scale this on the x-axis by -1, like so. So now it should line up on both sides. You don't have to duplicate the wheels, those were just for alignment purposes, but you do have to duplicate the track. Now, a couple things that need to happen to make the track work. Unturned requires that each side have its own separate material. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Materials, and I'm going to make a new material, and I'm going to use tank track, and then I'm going to click on New Material here so it duplicates it, and I'm going to just call this tank track _ R, and then I'm going to rename this one to tank track _ L for left and right. So then I'm going to select all of the left side with Control L, and I'm going to hit assign, and then I'm going to do the same for the right side, and I'm going to hit assign. So now each material has its own separate side. So next we need to add armature to tell the tank tracks how to move. So to do that, what we're going to do is first we're going to press Shift S and set our cursor to the world origin. That's where we want the bones to be created, and then we're going to hit Shift A and we're going to add an armature. And you can't see it, but it made a little bone right here. So first thing we need to do is go into edit mode, and I'm going to rename this bone to root. And then I'm also going to rotate this bone by 90 degrees on the y-axis, so it looks like this, facing towards the right of the vehicle. And then I'm going to duplicate, well first what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to this, the object properties viewport display and turn on in front, which lets me see it through objects, makes things a little easier. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this bone, like so, and I'm going to move it to the same position as the wheel. So I'm going to copy, or actually I can do Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I can say selection to cursor, and it'll move it right there. And we want to keep the same orientation, and I'm going to do the same thing over and over, just duplicating the bones each time. Okay, so that's one side, and you don't need to do the auxiliary wheels, just the main ones that touch the ground. And then we'll just go ahead and duplicate these and move them all to the other side. Alright, so now that we have our bones, we need to name them. So what I usually do is I'll say, like, for example, on the first left wheel, say wheel _ L0, and copy that. So wheel _ L1, wheel _ L2, etc., etc. And then on the right, we'll do wheel _ R1 to R0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so now you have your armature. You can turn off in front now, it kind of gets in the way. And then you can go ahead and hide the body and the turret and everything. I'll just get in the way. And now we have to do weight painting. You can also hide the wheels. So what weight painting does is it basically tells it which vertices are going to move when the bone moves. So to do that, first we're going to click on this order is important. We're going to click on the tracks, and then we're going to click on the armature. Then you're going to right click, go to parent, and you're going to press with automatic weights. Now we're not actually going to use the automatic weights, but that just links it up nicely. And then we're going to go into, we're going to click on the mesh, and we're going to click object mode, and we're going to weight painting. And you see it starts off having a few different weights already, but you can select which one you're doing at the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with root. And for root, I'm going to paint, I'm going to make sure my weight's on 1 or 100. I'm going to increase my size up here or with the square brackets. And then I'm going to paint every vertice that's not specifically tied to a bone. And I'm also going to change my strength to 10 because it'll make things faster. And this is because Unity warns you if you have vertices that aren't tied to a bone. So it's important that you do this. There we go. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clear every other bone because you see it selects a bunch of random stuff. We don't want that. So if you set your weight to 0, then you can go up here to set weight, or you can just hit Control X and it'll clear it. And then we'll do this for each wheel. And then you're going to go through again. We'll start with R0, which is the first right wheel. And then we're going to set our weight to 1. And we're just going to paint these 4 vertices at max. And then we'll do the same with R1. It's important to make sure that you get all the way around the mesh, not just the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to object mode, and then I'm going to select the armature, and then I want to go to pose mode here. So what we can do is we can mess around with the bones. So for example, if I hit G and I go Z, you should see no other vertices moving. So you see how those middle ones are moving? That's wrong. So what we need to do is fix that. So we'll go back into object mode and then go to weight paint. And we'll click on root, and we'll make sure that there is 0 painting everywhere else. So the easiest way to do that is just to set the weight to 0, hit Control X, set it to 1, and then redo all these. It's pretty quick. And there we go, that's done. So then I will go back to object mode, switch to this, and pose mode, and try one more time. And that looks a lot better. So we'll do that with each bone. You should only see the vertice below it moving. And that looks good. So now that's done, all we have to do is go ahead and make a low detail model for the low detail tank, the LOD. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to go back to object mode and select the mesh. And I'm just going to duplicate it to another mesh. We'll bring it over here with the low detail tank. And then after that, I'm also going to need to get rid of the tracks on it. So just Control L and you can delete faces. There we go. And then the easiest way to do this is to hit Alt P as in parent and then hit clear parent. So now you'll see that this is its own object. And you can also go here to this data tab and delete all these vertex groups. Press this minus because you don't need those. And then finally, what I'm going to do is just simplify the mesh a little bit. So I will grab the ring select, I'll double tap G, and I'll just merge some of these together, and then I'll do merge by distance. And same here. That one I'll leave. And then we'll do merge by distance, and I'll also move this here. And oops, again, merge by distance. That'll simplify the mesh a bit. I'll do the same thing on this side. And also I think we can cut out these rings here. So So there we go. Now we have a low detail model of the tracks, and it's just a normal mesh. It's not a skeletal mesh. So one thing I forgot to mention before is you need to check your face orientation. So if you go up here and click face orientation, anything that's not, or that's flipped around is gonna show as red. So if you just hit Control L here, you can type flip normals and do so like that. Same with this side, flip normals, and same with any other faces you see around that need it. So do it here. It's fine. It's not correct. There we go. And there you go. Everything looks good now. I think we're done with Blender. So now what we need to do is export it. And I have an extension called Unity FBX Exporter. And I'll put a link to that in the description. But here it is right here. And to install it, they have a guide here. You can just download this file and then you can place it, use the install button in the preferences window. And you also might have to enable the add-on. So that looks like this. We go to add-ons and you search for Unity and you just need to hit this checkbox. Actually, what we want to do really is make a collection for the stuff we're going to export. So I'm going to just call it export, and I'm going to put everything in there that needs to be exported. So basically not these. So what I can do is just select those and then hit Control I to select everything else. And then move that to export. So now when we want to export, all we have to do is right click and hit select objects and then file, export Unity FBX, that, and then we just hit overwrite. So now let's head over to Unity and import that. I'm going to go ahead and turn off material generation. That's optional. You do want to import animation and rig, but I'm going to also make some changes here to match the old Puma. 30 and import. Let's put 30 and then hit apply. So now that you have all your meshes set up and everything, next what we need to do is replace the, or drag in the entire prefab that you exported. That'd be this object here. So we're just going to drag it into our vehicle prefab. And then we're going to right click, go to prefab and click unpack completely. And then from here, we're going to grab the skeleton, which looks like this. And we're going to grab the LOD0 tracks. And we're just going to drag these out. And then you can delete it. And we're also going to make sure both of these are at 0, 0, 0. And same with the rotation, 0, 0, 0. But then they look like they're in the right spot. And you'll notice that if we try moving some of these around, the track will move with it, which is what we want. Next, and this is very important or else they'll be invisible, we're going to tag the, or set the layer of the mesh to vehicle. And you can also tag it with vehicle. But the layer is the important part. And we can change our materials to tank tracks. And there we go. Now we have our tracks in place. And now we need to add the wheels. So you can make an object called wheels. And then you can drag in your wheels. So I'm just going to grab these from another vehicle, but you should have your own prefab somewhere that you can use. I'll just grab all these since it's the same count. And then I'll head back to our other vehicle. And I'll paste these in here like this. It's also important that your wheels object is at 0, 0, 0. Or at least it helps. So move your wheels object to 0, 0, 0, like so. Alright, and then we can just move our wheels into place. So I'm going to look at the scale we used in Blender, which was 0.8 for the wheels and 0.68 for the auxiliary wheels. So I'll go ahead and set these correctly. 0.8. There we go. And this is where having your object at 0, 0, 0 in Blender comes in handy. Because now I can just go through, I'm going to move this to my other monitor, but I can just kind of map these coordinates onto the Unity coordinates. So what I can do is I can copy the x value here, negative 1.62, and that's on the right side. So I'll grab one of the wheels on the right side. Actually, I'll grab all of them because they're all in the same spot. And then I'll go ahead and set the x to, it should actually be positive because the coordinate systems are reversed. And then on the other side, we can use negative. If your vehicle is not symmetrical, then you're going to have to do it separately for each side, but ours is. And then now we'll go ahead and start doing the z coordinates. All the bottom wheels will have the same z coordinate, so I'm just going to go ahead and paste that on all of the bottom wheels. And z maps to y in this case, because z is up and down in Blender, but y is up and down in Unity. And then for z, we're going to take the the y axis, and then we'll put that in our z axis. So this is our back right wheel. So I'll grab the back right wheel, and I'll go ahead and paste this, and I need to make it negative, actually. And then for 4, we'll do the same thing. Fourth wheel, copy the y, and then I'll click wheel 4, and I'll do negative, and then paste that in there. And you'll see it's at the right spot. And we'll do that for every single right wheel. All right, now that's done, you can just kind of copy over your z coordinate and paste it on the corresponding left wheel. And we have our main wheels, and then we're going to do the same thing for our auxiliary wheels. And we have our wheels. Also, I want to mention that your wheels need to be tagged and layered as debris, like so. And they also need a disabled box collider, like this. So when they fly off, they have collision and can land on the ground. So now what we need to do is add tires. So what you're going to do is you're going to make a new empty object. If you have another vehicle, you could just copy these from there. Actually, we already have tires, but these are bad, so I'm going to delete these and start over. So what I recommend doing is copying your tires from the vanilla tank, at least your tire settings, like so. I'm going to be copying it from another vehicle we have, so it's the same suspension settings, but the vanilla settings are pretty good. And then all you're going to want to do is just adjust your radius to fit your wheel, and also raise it up a bit. Usually what you want is to have the top of the suspension level with the middle of your wheel here. So it can't go up anymore, but it can go down. So this is like the maximum height your wheel can be at. You may want to raise it up a little more, but you probably don't want it like this, because then your wheel will barely be able to go down, but it can go up a lot. So you probably want it around here. And then we're also going to set you're going to want to make sure your tires object is a 0, 0, 0. I don't know why Unity does that. And then we'll just grab the coordinates. I'm just going to copy this actually and paste it right on here. And then we're probably just going to move it up just slightly. So maybe negative 0.25. Like so, which allows the wheel to go down a lot and up just a little bit. And also, we're going to have to tune the radius. I'm going to go into isometric mode for this. If you press F, it'll get rid of that issue for focus. And I'm going to move it up just so I can figure out a good radius. 0.48 is probably good. And then I'll move it back down to where it was. Now I'm just going to duplicate this over and over. That's L0, so we'll have L1. And we'll just copy the Z values for these wheels. And like so, now our entire left side has wheel colliders. So you want them to be in the middle of the wheels like this. You don't need tire colliders for the auxiliary wheels. And then what we're going to do, we're just going to duplicate all these and drag them to the bottom so they're all together. And we'll just rename them to ours. And then we'll just set their X position to positive 1.6 instead, so they're on the other side. And the tires are good to go. And I'm also going to do a little bit of renaming here. This will be named Model 2. Then I'm also going to make a Model 3, which has the track LOD 1 right here. And we'll assign this a material. Yep. And oh, I made a mistake. I need to clear the second material on the LOD1. So we'll just remove this, save, and then re-export. Reload, and now we have two sides. And then we just have to add it to the LOD group. Model 3 goes here, and Model 2 goes here. Now you see if we switch, we get a lower detail track that isn't affected by the skeletal mesh. So now you've done that, there's actually one other thing we need to do, and that's to add position constraints. So I'm going to go ahead and rename the skeleton to track armature. It's not a requirement, it's just how I like to name it. So what we need to do is add a position constraint to each one of these bones. That way it follows the wheel. So I'm going to add a position constraint here, and I'm going to grab the wheel under wheels, wheel L0. Oops, hit add first. And then I'm going to drag that over there, and then I'm going to say is active, and I'll click activate and 0. Now what that does is that means when this wheel moves, the bone moves with it, like so. So we're going to do the same with all the other bones. So we can just copy component, it's easier. Paste component is new, and then we swap this out for L1. And make sure you're getting the right L1, like so. And then we just do this over and over for each wheel. So next what we're going to have to do is edit the dat file. So I'm going to pull up a couple things. First I'm going to pull up the vanilla tank. And if you're making a tank, you can just copy these values here. I'm going to copy some different values, and I'm going to paste them up here. Next what we need to do is actually define the crawler track material. So I'm going to say crawler track tiling materials, and I'm going to make a new object here. So there's a few things you need. First, you need the path to the skeletal mesh, which is model 2. So I'll say path, model 2. Then I'll say material index 0 or 1. Start with 0. And this is why you need two materials for this, 0 and 1. And you need to figure out which one's your left and right material. The order you define it in Blender isn't always the same. For example, we put left in the beginning on Blender. Look at this. See, left is first, even though in Unity it actually exports right first. So just try changing it to another material and see which one looks right. And you'll see that left is actually index 1. So we'll start with index 1. Next, you have to define the wheel indices that are going to fall under this. And we have 6 wheels on each side. So I'm going to say for this one, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's the 6 wheels. And your repeat distance, the way we'd set it up, it's going to be 1.5. That's how our material's set up. And the UV direction is actually, for us, going to be 1, 0, the way we set it up. So what we're going to do is just duplicate this and change the material index to 0, and we're going to change the wheel indexes to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So those are our other 6 wheels, and everything else can stay the same. And after that, we have to define our wheels. So you can probably just copy one of these from the vanilla tank, but we're going to do it a little differently. And we're going to say first what you have to do is you have to give it a path to the wheel collider, which is the tire. So it's tires, tire L0, and the steering mode is going to be the crawler track, which is the tank tracks. And is collider powered is going to be true. That means does it get power from the engine? Yes. And then you're going to have to give it the path to the mesh, the wheel mesh, which is wheels, wheel L0. And then you're going to want to tell it to use the collider pose, which means that the wheel will rotate with the tire. And your suspension offset is just kind of going to be a fixed value. So we'll save this at 0.2. And the suspension speed is like how fast the suspension applies. So we'll set that to 1. And then your motion effects, what I like to do for these is your first wheel gets backward only, and your last wheel gets forward only on each side. That way you don't have material, or you don't have particles coming from every single wheel, just your first and last one. And can't explode, you probably want to set to false. It looks a little weird when the wheel comes out and the track's still there. And then your track speed index, this is a reference to this array. So you're basically saying copy the speed of track 0. And then we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to set motion effects to none if you want. And then we're going to update this so that it's 1, 1, and then we're going to keep duplicating this 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and 5, 5. And then on the last one, we say forward only for the motion effects. And then we're just going to copy this, and we're going to paste it again for the right ones. So I'm going to change all these to R instead of L. And if you want a little shortcut, if you're using Visual Studio or whatever, all you have to do is do the search and replace. You can do L, and then we'll put /D for the number, turn on regex mode, and then so make sure you select everywhere you want to replace. And then we'll find and replace with R $1. And then we'll hit replace all. And then you also need to update these to be 1 instead of 0 for your crawler index. So now it's referencing the second track. And then the last thing you need to do is add your auxiliary wheels. So for those, we just make a new wheel. And then we do a little less here. Is collider steered needs to be false. And then we just use the model path of the auxiliary wheel. And then we also need to set the radius of the wheel. You can measure this pretty easily by just going to one of the wheels and adding a 3D object, sphere. Then just kind of add a sphere and raise the radius of the collider until it looks good. 0.57 is good for the scale of wheels I'm using here. But that's pretty much the easiest way to measure it. And then you can delete that when you're done. So I'm going to be using 0.57 for that. And then can't explode is still false. And then you want to tell it which track to copy from, and that's going to be 0 for the first two, the left wheels. And then for the right wheels, you're going to change that to 1 right here. And then you can save because you have all your wheels set up and we are good to go. You also might want to set up gears, but that's not what this video is about, so you can figure that out on your own. I'm just going to copy this from another vehicle for now. One other thing you're also going to want to do is go in here and set your explosion burn material sections, and you're just going to put every single mesh renderer or skeletal mesh renderer in here. And what that does is it just defines which materials get burned when it explodes. That way you don't have certain parts of the vehicle not exploding. I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see, like, for example, the wheels are completely uncharred. Same with the headlights and the glass. And a lot of it just doesn't get charred, which doesn't look good. Actually, one of them got charred, but the other one didn't, which looks even worse. So what you need to do is you need to go in here and define every single mesh renderer in this array here. So if I reload and then let it explode again, see, now it looks right and everything's charred and it looks better. And now we are good to go. So we can save this, and we can go ahead and export the bundle in Unity and make sure everything works. First thing you want to do is look at turning. So your left one should go down if you turn left, and your right one should go down if you turn right. If that's not happening, then something's messed up. Most likely you didn't separate your materials correctly if that happens. But then you should make sure things work. Try like going on a ledge, see if your wheels go up like that. And just drive around a bit. Seems to be working okay. If your radius is set right, your auxiliary wheels should move a bit slower. And they should kind of line up with the texture on the track. And also, if you go to like a fixed object, like the edge of the ground, you want to make sure your tracks don't really seem to be moving at all. See how they're kind of fixed to the ground? That's what you want. And that's all you need to create basic tank tracks in Unturned. Good luck!